A black woman with a broken arm was working 3 registers alone. The other cashiers, all white, stood chatting by empty lanes, their blue name tags gleaming under fluorescent lights. Meanwhile, Keisha's red name tag caught the sweat dripping down her face as she struggled to scan groceries one-handed, her cast bumping painfully against each item. CEO Michael Davis watched from aisle 7, his shopping cart forgotten. The scheduling board behind checkout told a story that made his blood run cold. Blue dots next to white employees, red dots next to every black and Latino name. Performance standards don't change because of personal circumstances, announced store manager Taylor, loud enough for the growing line of frustrated customers to hear. He was timing Keisha with his phone while she fumbled with heavy milk jugs. A customer muttered, "This is ridiculous." Another pulled out their phone to record. But what Davis saw next in that color-coded scheduling system would expose a conspiracy so systematic, so calculated, that it reached into 23 stores and destroyed hundreds of careers. The woman with the broken arm was just the beginning. The morning shift at Riverside Grocery began like any other, with 23 employees clocking in across different departments. The Atlanta suburb location served a diverse community, and the workforce reflected that diversity. Nearly 70% of the staff were people of color, many of whom had worked there for years. Keisha Williams arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, her cast still fresh from last week's accident. She'd slipped on ice in the parking lot after her evening shift, breaking her radius bone cleanly. The emergency room doctor had been clear: light duty for 6 weeks, no heavy lifting, minimal repetitive motion. She'd brought the medical note to store manager Robert Taylor the next day. "I understand your situation," Taylor had said, barely glancing at the paperwork, "but we're short-staffed." The schedule is the schedule. Now, 3 days later, she was assigned to the busiest register during morning rush hour. The electronic scanner beeped incessantly as she struggled to maneuver items with her left hand. Milk jugs, watermelons, cases of soda. Each beep sent a small jolt of pain up her arm. Behind her, the scheduling board dominated the break room wall. The color-coded system had appeared 6 months ago, introduced by District Manager Patricia Stevens as part of her Efficiency Optimization Program. Blue dots marked some names, red dots marked others. The pattern wasn't random, though few employees had noticed yet. Of the 8 cashiers scheduled today, 5 bore red dots, all minorities. The 3 with blue dots were white employees, assigned to the slower lanes with express checkout limits. Damon Thompson stocked shelves in grocery, his red dot corresponding to the overnight shift he'd been moved to without explanation. Sarah Johnson, a white college student, had a blue dot and worked prime afternoon hours that fit her class schedule perfectly. "Keisha, line's backing up," called Assistant Manager Jennifer Walsh, pointing to the growing queue of impatient customers. "Yes, ma'am, doing my best," Keisha replied, sweat beading on her forehead despite the store's air conditioning. A elderly customer noticed her cast. "Honey, should you be working with that arm?" "I'm managing fine, thank you," Keisha smiled, though her good hand trembled slightly as she reached for another item. Taylor appeared from his office, clipboard in hand. He glanced at the scheduling board, made a note, then walked past Keisha's overwhelmed register without stopping. His focus seemed entirely on the numbers: transaction times, items per minute, customer throughput. The human cost didn't factor into his calculations. By her lunch break, Keisha had processed 127 customers compared to the 40 to 45 handled by her Blue Dot colleagues. The disparity wasn't accidental, but she couldn't yet see the system behind it. None of them could. The patterns were there, hidden in plain sight on that color-coded board. Someone just needed to decode what the colors really meant. The afternoon rush brought chaos to Keisha's register. A line of 15 customers snaked back into the produce section while neighboring lanes remained lightly staffed. Her cast had grown heavy during the morning, and now each scan sent shooting pain up to her shoulder. "This is ridiculous," muttered a customer halfway through the line. "Why is the injured girl handling the longest line?" At Register 3, Sarah Johnson chatted casually with her single customer, a regular who stopped by for coffee and a newspaper. Her blue dot assignment ensured a steady but manageable flow. At Register 5, another blue dot employee had been sent on an extended break. Keisha's scanner jammed on a barcode. She tried to fix it left-handed, awkwardly manipulating the device while her cast bumped against the counter. The delay triggered angry sighs from waiting customers. "Can you move any slower?" snapped a man clutching energy drinks and cigarettes. "I apologize, sir. Technical difficulty." Keisha's voice remained steady, professional, though her face flushed with embarrassment. Store manager Taylor emerged from aisle 12, surveyed the scene, and walked directly to Keisha's register. But instead of offering help or calling for backup, he pulled out his phone and began timing her transactions. "Williams, your speed is below standard," he announced loudly enough for customers to hear. "Corporate expects 23 items per minute. You're at 18 inches. Several customers turned to stare. Keisha's face burned with humiliation as she tried to work faster, her cast knocking against products as she struggled with one-handed scanning. "Maybe if you gave her some help instead of criticism," suggested a middle-aged woman in line. Taylor ignored the comment. "Performance standards don't change because of personal circumstances. We have quotas to meet." From her position at the express lane, Sarah Johnson watched the scene unfold with growing discomfort. She'd been assigned the lightest workload despite being the newest employee. The unfairness was becoming impossible to ignore. As Keisha's line grew longer, District Manager Patricia Stevens appeared from the administrative office upstairs. She observed the situation with clinical detachment, occasionally making notes on her tablet. When a customer complained loudly about the wait, Stevens simply nodded and moved on without intervention. The breaking point came when Keisha dropped a jar of pasta sauce. It shattered across the floor, splashing her legs with tomato and glass. She stared at the mess, her composure finally cracking. "I can clean this up," she whispered, starting to kneel. "No," said the woman who'd defended her earlier. "Absolutely not. You're injured." She turned to Taylor. "Get someone else to clean this up and give this woman proper support." Taylor's response was swift and cold. "Williams, this counts as a safety incident. I'll need to write you up." The customers erupted in protests, but Keisha simply nodded, accepting the unfair consequence. She'd learned that fighting back only made things worse. The system seemed designed to break her down, though she couldn't understand why. In the break room, the scheduling board's pattern became clearer to anyone paying attention. Every Red Dot employee faced similar struggles: impossible schedules, inadequate support, scrutiny for every mistake. The Blue Dot workers enjoyed reasonable expectations, flexible hours, and patience for their learning curves. The injustice was systematic, deliberate, and devastating. Keisha was just one casualty in a broader war being waged through spreadsheets and scheduling algorithms. As she clocked out that evening, exhausted and demoralized, she had no idea that corporate leadership was about to learn the truth about those colored dots. CEO Michael Davis couldn't shake the image of that scheduling board. 3 days had passed since his shopping trip to Riverside Grocery, but the pattern of colored dots haunted his thoughts during board meetings and strategy sessions. At his corner office in downtown Atlanta, Davis pulled up the store's employee records on his computer. The diversity statistics looked good on paper: 68% minority workforce, competitive wages, standard benefits package. Everything appeared normal until he cross-referenced the scheduling data. The patterns emerged immediately. Red Dot employees averaged 47 hours per week compared to 32 hours for Blue Dot workers. Overtime was concentrated among minorities, while white employees maintained part-time status that preserved their benefit eligibility without burning them out. The disparity was mathematically precise, too organized to be coincidental. Davis's assistant knocked on his door. "Your 3 p.m. is here." "Send them away. I need an hour." His fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling reports from all 23 Riverside locations. The pattern replicated across every store. Color-coded scheduling that systematically overworked minority employees while protecting white staff. The efficiency metrics that corporate celebrated were built on the backs of workers like Keisha Williams. A memory surfaced from his own past. 25 years ago, fresh out of college, he'd worked retail to pay off student loans. The manager had given him prime shifts and patient training while his black coworker Jerome got overnight stock duty and constant criticism. Davis had assumed it was performance-based. Now he recognized the pattern he'd been blind to then. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. "Still coming to dinner with the Johnsons tonight?" Davis stared at the message. How many dinner parties had he attended while employees like Keisha struggled with broken arms and impossible schedules? How many board meetings had celebrated efficiency improvements that were really just sophisticated discrimination? The legal implications were staggering. If this system was intentional, Riverside faced massive liability: discrimination lawsuits, federal investigations, criminal charges for civil rights violations. But more than legal consequences, this was a moral failure at the highest levels. He called his head of security. "Jim, I need you to set up a cover identity for me. Full backstory, fake references, the works." "Sir, I'm going undercover in one of our stores. This has to be completely confidential. No one else can know, not even the board." "What position?" Davis thought about the scheduling board, about Keisha's exhausted face, about the systematic nature of the injustice. "Night janitor. I want to see how this place really operates when management thinks no one important is watching." The risk was enormous. If discovered, the media would crucify him for corporate theater. If the discrimination was as bad as the data suggested, the legal exposure could destroy the company. But doing nothing wasn't an option anymore. That evening, Davis skipped dinner with the Johnsons. Instead, he practiced his backstory in the mirror. David Miller, laid-off construction worker, desperate for any job that paid the bills. He studied the employee handbook, memorized store protocols, and prepared to see his company through the eyes of the people at the bottom of the hierarchy. Tomorrow, he would discover whether those colored dots represented conscious evil or bureaucratic negligence. Either way, the system was about to face its reckoning. David Miller clocked in for his first night shift at 10 p.m., wearing a borrowed uniform that hung loose on his frame. The store transformed after closing time. Fluorescent lights dimmed to half power, overnight crew emerging from break rooms like workers in a different world. "You're the new guy," said Damon Thompson, a tall black man who'd been moved to night stocking 6 months earlier. "Fair warning, they work us hard here." Davis nodded, adjusting his fake name tag. "Need the job. I'll do whatever it takes." The scheduling board loomed over the break room, its colored dots more ominous in the dim lighting. Davis counted 12 overnight workers, 10 with red dots, 2 with blue. The blue dot employees were assigned to cake decorating and inventory counts. Everyone else faced the physical demands of unloading trucks and restocking shelves. Damon handed him a box cutter. "Truck comes in at midnight. 3,000 cases to unload, sort, and stock before 6 a.m. Management times everything." At 11:47 p.m., a massive delivery truck backed up to the loading dock. The overnight supervisor, a white man named Kevin Bradley with a blue dot by his name, checked his clipboard and pointed to the trailer. "Gentlemen, we've got dog food, canned goods, and frozen items tonight. Standard pace is 500 cases per hour. Let's move." Davis joined the line of workers passing boxes from truck to store. Within minutes, he understood why Damon looked exhausted. The pace was relentless. Lift, pivot, stack, repeat. His back ached after 20 minutes. "These men did this every night." "How long you been on nights?" Davis asked Damon during a water break. 6 months. Used to work days until the new efficiency program started. They moved all the us experienced guys to overnight. Said it was a promotion. "What about the day crew now?" Damon's laugh held no humor. Bunch of new hires, white kids mostly. They get training time, patient supervisors, normal schedules. We get this. At 2 a.m., District Manager Patricia Stevens arrived for what she called a spot inspection. She moved through the store with military precision, checking displays, examining inventory counts, timing workers with a stopwatch app. Davis kept his head down as she approached his section. Through his peripheral vision, he watched her observe Damon struggling with a particularly heavy case of dog food. "Thompson, you're moving too slowly," Stevens announced. 15 cases behind schedule. "Yes, ma'am. Trying to be careful with the stacking. Careful doesn't meet quotas. Speed up or we'll need to discuss your future here." Stevens made a note on her tablet, then moved on without acknowledgement when Damon worked faster despite obvious strain. When she passed Davis, a presumed new white employee, she simply nodded politely. At 3:30 a.m., Davis volunteered to empty trash bins near the administrative offices upstairs. The door to Stevens's office was ajar, revealing file cabinets marked Personnel Confidential. His janitor's key ring included a master key that opened most interior doors. Inside the office, he found what he was looking for. A 3-ring binder labeled Scheduling Optimization Phase 2 sat on Stevens's desk. He photographed each page with his phone, hands trembling as the scope of the system became clear. The colored dots weren't random. Blue indicated retention priority employees, those deemed worth investing in for long-term growth. Red marked expendable resources, workers to be maximized for short-term productivity, then cycled out when they burned out or complained. The documentation was meticulous. Stevens had tracked performance metrics, turnover rates, and what she called compliance indicators for each employee category. Red dot workers faced impossible standards, inadequate breaks, and progressive discipline for minor infractions. Blue dot employees received coaching, flexible scheduling, and second chances for mistakes. A separate folder contained correspondence with other district managers, sharing best practices for the color coding system. The program had spread to 15 stores, affecting over 400 employees. The smoking gun was a congratulatory email from Regional Director Thomas Wilson, praising Stevens for innovative labor cost management that had improved profit margins by 12% across her district. She'd received a $15,000 bonus for implementing what the company internally called strategic workforce optimization. Davis photographed everything, his anger growing with each page. This wasn't unconscious bias or poor management. It was systematic, documented discrimination designed to extract maximum value from minority workers while protecting and nurturing white employees. By dawn, he'd seen enough. The overnight crew stumbled toward the time clock, exhausted after 8 hours of punishment disguised as employment. Damon could barely lift his arms to clock out. "Same time tomorrow night," Damon said to Davis. "If you survive that long." Davis nodded, though he knew tomorrow would bring a very different kind of work. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and about to destroy Patricia Stevens's carefully constructed system of exploitation. The colored dots were about to lose their power forever. Davis returned to his corporate office at 8 a.m., wearing his janitor's uniform. His secretary looked puzzled as he rushed past her desk, but he'd explain everything later. First, he needed to review the photographs and prepare for what would be the most difficult conversation of his career. The images from Stevens's office told a story of calculated cruelty. Each document built upon the last, creating an undeniable pattern of racial discrimination disguised as business efficiency. The scheduling optimization manual read like a playbook for legal discrimination, sophisticated enough to avoid obvious civil rights violations, systematic enough to devastate lives. Page 12 detailed the psychological strategy behind the color system. Red dot employees faced escalating pressure designed to force voluntary resignations, avoiding the legal complexities of termination. Blue dot workers received investment and development, ensuring loyalty and reducing turnover in positions the company valued. A spreadsheet tracked the results. 47 minority employees had quit in the past year across Stevens's district, citing workplace stress or better opportunities elsewhere. Meanwhile, white employee retention reached 94%, with most receiving promotions or wage increases. The bonus structure was the most damning evidence. Stevens earned additional compensation based on labor cost optimization, a euphemism for squeezing maximum productivity from expendable workers while minimizing investment in their development or well-being. Davis's hands shook as he read an email exchange between Stevens and another district manager, sharing tactics for managing problematic employees without creating legal liability. The language was coded but clear: make conditions so difficult that minorities would quit rather than file discrimination complaints. At 10 a.m., his phone rang. Stevens's name appeared on the caller ID. "Mr. Davis?" "Patricia Stevens calling. I wanted to update you on our district performance metrics." Davis activated his phone's recording function. "Go ahead, Patricia." "Excellent news. We're exceeding productivity targets by 18% this quarter. The new scheduling protocols have been incredibly effective at maximizing our human resources." "Tell me more about these protocols." Stevens's voice grew confident, proud even. "Well, we've implemented a tiered system for employee management. Different categories of workers receive different levels of support based on their strategic value to the organization." "How do you determine strategic value?" "Several factors: potential for advancement, cultural fit, long-term retention probability. We focus our development resources on employees most likely to contribute to company growth." Davis felt sick. "And the other employees?" "We maintain appropriate productivity standards for all staff members. Some individuals require more structured oversight to meet performance expectations. It's basic workforce management." "These productivity standards, are they applied equally across all demographics?" A pause. "Of course. We follow all employment laws and company policies." The lie came so smoothly that Davis realized Stevens might actually believe her own rationalization. She'd convinced herself that systematic discrimination was just smart business. After ending the call, Davis reviewed the recording alongside the documents. Stevens had just admitted to tiered treatment of employees based on subjective criteria that aligned perfectly with racial categories. Combined with the written evidence, her own words provided the final piece of an airtight case. His legal team would have a field day with this material. The Department of Labor would launch investigations. The media would scrutinize every aspect of the company's employment practices. But Davis wasn't thinking about legal exposure or public relations disasters. He was thinking about Keisha Williams, working with a broken arm while white colleagues enjoyed light duty. He was thinking about Damon Thompson, demoted to night shifts for the crime of being experienced and black. He was thinking about 400 employees across 15 stores who'd been systematically exploited by a system designed to break their spirits. The evidence was overwhelming. Now came the harder task: dismantling a system of oppression that had infected his company at the highest levels and ensuring it could never return. Justice was about to be served, with Patricia Stevens's own words providing the soundtrack to her downfall. At 2 p.m. on a busy Tuesday afternoon, CEO Michael Davis walked through the front doors of Riverside Grocery in his business suit, carrying a folder of evidence that would change everything. Customers continued shopping, unaware they were about to witness corporate justice in action. Keisha Williams stood at Register 1, her cast now covered in colorful signatures from loyal customers who'd grown fond of her despite the system working against her. She didn't recognize the well-dressed man approaching her checkout lane. "Excuse me," Davis said quietly. "Is your store manager available?" "Yes, sir, let me call him." Keisha reached for the phone, but Davis gently stopped her. "Actually, I'd prefer to make an announcement first. Do you know how to use the store intercom?" Something in his tone made her pause. "Sir, are you—" "My name is Michael Davis. I'm the CEO of this company, and I need to address your entire staff immediately." Keisha's eyes widened. Around them, other employees had noticed the conversation. Sarah Johnson at Register 3 looked over curiously. Damon Thompson, stalking nearby shelves, moved closer to listen. Davis picked up the courtesy phone and dialed the intercom code. His voice echoed through every corner of the store. "Attention Riverside Grocery employees and customers. This is Michael Davis, CEO of this company. I need all staff members to gather at the front of the store immediately. This is not a drill." The reaction was immediate. Employees emerged from aisles, offices, and storage rooms. Store manager Taylor hurried from the pharmacy section, his face pale with confusion. District Manager Stevens descended the stairs from the administrative offices, her expression shifting from surprise to alarm as she recognized Davis. Within 3 minutes, 22 employees had assembled near the checkout lanes. Curious customers formed a loose circle, sensing drama unfolding. Davis climbed onto a checkout counter to address the crowd. 6 months ago, this store implemented a new scheduling system using colored dots to categorize employees. I'm here because that system represents systematic racial discrimination that ends today. Stevens stepped forward, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Mr. Davis, there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss this privately." "No more private discussions, Patricia. No more coded language or efficiency metrics that hide prejudice behind spreadsheets." Davis opened his folder and pulled out the first document, a blown-up photo of the scheduling board with its colored dots clearly visible. Red dots mark minority employees for exploitation. Impossible schedules, dangerous working conditions, progressive discipline for minor infractions. Blue dots mark white employees for protection and development. Different standards, different opportunities, different futures, based solely on race. The employees stared at the board they'd seen every day for months, finally understanding its true purpose. Damon Thompson's hands clenched into fists. Sarah Johnson covered her mouth in shock. Keisha Williams felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "That's absolutely untrue," Stevens protested. "The color system is purely operational." "Then explain this." Davis held up a printed email. "Your message to Regional Director Wilson, celebrating a $15,000 bonus for innovative labor cost management through strategic workforce optimization." Your own words, Patricia. Stevens's face drained of color. Several employees gasped as they realized the scope of the deception. "And this." Davis played the recorded phone conversation on his cell phone, speakers at maximum volume. Stevens's voice filled the store. "We focus our development resources on employees most likely to contribute to company growth. Some individuals require more structured oversight to meet performance expectations." The crowd erupted. Employees shouted questions and accusations. Customers pulled out phones to record the confrontation. Stevens looked around desperately for escape routes that no longer existed. Store manager Taylor tried to control the situation. "Everyone calm down. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." "The explanation is simple," Davis interrupted. "Robert Taylor, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises." Taylor's mouth fell open. "You can't." "I can, and I am." "Patricia Stevens, same applies to you. Your systematic discrimination has caused immeasurable harm to hardworking people who deserved better from this company." Stevens finally found her voice, desperation making her reckless. "This is an overreaction. Every business optimizes labor costs. We followed all legal guidelines." "Legal and moral are not the same thing," Davis replied. "You created a system designed to break people's spirits and force them to quit. You documented it, celebrated it, and spread it to other stores. That ends now." Security officers arrived to escort both terminated managers from the building. As Stevens was led away, she turned back toward the crowd of employees she'd manipulated for months. "This won't stick," she called out. "Corporate will reverse this decision when they see the productivity numbers." Davis's response was heard throughout the store. I am corporate, Patricia, and these people's dignity is worth more than your productivity metrics. As the security team disappeared through the exit doors, the assembled employees stood in stunned silence. The system that had controlled their lives for 6 months had just crumbled in 15 minutes. But Davis wasn't finished. The real work was just beginning. With Stevens and Taylor gone, Davis faced 22 employees whose trust in management had been shattered. The store fell unnaturally quiet as customers resumed shopping, whispering about the drama they'd witnessed. "I know you have questions," Davis began, his voice carrying across the checkout area. "You have every right to be angry, confused, and skeptical of anything I say. The system failed you. I failed you by not seeing this sooner." Damon Thompson stepped forward. "So what happens now? You fire 2 people and everything's supposed to be okay?" "Nothing about this is okay," Davis replied. "Firing those managers was just the first step. Real change requires rebuilding everything from the ground up." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Jim, I need the regional HR director at Riverside Grocery within the hour. Also have legal send 3 employment attorneys and someone from our diversity and inclusion department." Hanging up, he turned back to the employees. "Every single one of you will have the opportunity to file complaints, seek compensation for damages, and participate in designing new policies to ensure this never happens again." Sarah Johnson raised her hand tentatively. "What about those of us who benefited from the system? I got good schedules because of my blue dot." The honesty in her question impressed Davis. "Sarah, the fact that you recognize the unfairness shows integrity. Moving forward, good schedules will be earned through seniority, performance, and need, not skin color." He walked to the scheduling board and ripped down the color-coded chart, tearing it into pieces. "This poisonous system ends today. We're implementing new scheduling software with built-in fairness algorithms. Every shift assignment will be documented and reviewable." An older black woman from the deli section spoke up. "My name's Dorothy Miller. I've been here 8 years and I've watched good people get ground down by this place. How do we know you won't just find subtler ways to discriminate?" Davis appreciated her directness. "Dorothy, you don't know. You have no reason to trust corporate promises after what you've experienced. That's why we're creating an independent oversight board with real power to investigate complaints and make changes." He outlined the reforms as employees gathered closer. Anonymous reporting systems, regular bias audits, promotion criteria based on measurable qualifications, and financial compensation for employees who'd suffered under the discriminatory system. "Keisha Williams," Davis called out. "Please step forward." Keisha approached hesitantly, still wearing her name tag and cast. "Effective immediately, I'm promoting you to assistant manager of this store. Your salary increases to $52,000 annually with full management benefits." The announcement drew surprised applause from her co-workers. Keisha stared at Davis in shock. "Sir, I appreciate this, but I don't want charity." "This isn't charity. For 6 months, you've demonstrated leadership under impossible circumstances. You've shown grace under pressure, loyalty to this company despite its failures, and dedication that puts most managers to shame. You've earned this position." Tears welled in Keisha's eyes as the reality sank in. Her colleagues cheered, and several customers who'd witnessed her struggles over recent weeks joined the applause. "Damon Thompson," Davis continued, "you're promoted to department manager for grocery. Your experience and work ethic have been wasted on overnight shifts designed to hide your talents." Damon's stoic expression cracked slightly. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." "You already haven't let us down. The company let you down." Davis spent the next hour meeting with each employee individually, reviewing their experiences under the discriminatory system and discussing career goals that had been systematically blocked. The conversations revealed the full scope of Stevens's damage: missed promotions, denied training opportunities, unfair disciplinary actions, and deliberate scheduling conflicts with family obligations. By 4 p.m., the HR team arrived with attorneys and policy experts. They set up temporary offices in the break room to begin formal interviews and documentation of discrimination claims. Each employee would have legal representation provided by the company. The new store manager arrived shortly after. Maria Rodriguez, a respected leader from another district with a track record of developing diverse teams and creating inclusive workplace cultures. Maria will be leading the transition, Davis announced. She's been briefed on everything that happened here, and she has full authority to implement changes immediately. Rodriguez addressed the staff with warmth and determination. We're not just changing policies, we're changing culture. Every decision will be transparent, every opportunity will be fairly distributed, and every person will be treated with dignity. As the afternoon wore on, employees began sharing stories they'd kept buried for months. The break room transformed into a support group as workers realized they weren't alone in their experiences. Sarah Johnson apologized tearfully to colleagues for not speaking up when she witnessed unfair treatment. Damon Thompson mentored younger employees who'd been afraid to report problems. The scheduling board was replaced with a new system showing shift assignments based on seniority, availability, and rotation fairness. No colors, no codes, no hidden meanings, just transparent scheduling that treated everyone equally. By closing time, the store felt different. Employees walked taller, spoke more freely, and looked at their workplace with hope instead of resignation. The toxic culture that had festered for months was beginning to heal. But the transformation extended beyond Riverside Grocery. Davis's phone buzzed with updates from legal teams investigating all 23 stores in Stevens's network. The discriminatory system was being dismantled everywhere it had taken root, with similar reforms and accountability measures implemented company-wide. The colored dots were gone forever, replaced by policies that valued every employee's contribution regardless of their background. Justice had been served, but more importantly, a better future was being built. 2 weeks after the confrontation, the atmosphere at Riverside Grocery had transformed completely. The break room buzz during shift changes reflected genuine camaraderie rather than whispered complaints about unfair treatment. Keisha Williams sat in her new office, a small space behind the customer service counter that she'd helped redesign. The scheduling software on her computer screen showed a beautiful sight: fair distribution of hours, reasonable workload expectations, and transparent criteria for every assignment decision. Her cast had come off the previous day, and she flexed her fingers while reviewing performance reports that actually meant something now. Under the old system, metrics had been manipulated to justify predetermined conclusions. Now they tracked genuine productivity improvements and employee satisfaction. Damon Thompson knocked on her doorframe. "Got a minute, boss?" The word boss still felt strange, but Keisha was growing into the role naturally. "Always have time for you, Damon." "What's on your mind?" "The night crew's working great together, but I wanted to talk about cross-training opportunities. Some of the day shift folks are interested in learning inventory management." It was exactly the kind of conversation that would have been impossible under Stevens's regime. Employee development had been reserved for blue dot workers only. Now everyone had access to training, advancement opportunities, and career mentorship. "Let's set up a meeting with Maria," Keisha suggested. "She's been pushing for more cross-training programs." Store manager Maria Rodriguez had exceeded everyone's expectations. Rather than imposing corporate mandates, she'd listened to employees' ideas for improving operations and customer service. The store's performance had actually improved since eliminating the discriminatory practices, proof that fairness and efficiency could coexist. Sarah Johnson appeared in the doorway, holding a clipboard. "Sorry to interrupt, but we've got the customer satisfaction surveys from last week." "Come in, Sarah." "What do they show?" "Best scores in our district. Customers are commenting on how happy the staff seems, how helpful everyone is. One person wrote, 'Whatever changed here, keep doing it.'" The three of them smiled at the feedback. Customer service had improved dramatically when employees no longer felt demoralized and unsupported. People who'd been written up for minor infractions under the old system were now receiving praise for their dedication and professionalism. Dorothy Miller joined the impromptu meeting, carrying a tray of sandwiches from the deli. "Thought you all might be hungry. We made extra for the afternoon crew." The simple gesture represented a broader cultural shift. Employees looked out for each other now, sharing resources and celebrating successes together. The toxic environment that had pitted workers against each other was being replaced by genuine teamwork. "Dorothy, how's the new scheduling working for your department?" Maria asked. "Much better. People can actually plan their lives now. My grandson's got a school play next week, and I know I can attend because the schedule's fair and predictable." These small victories meant everything. Under Stephen's system, family obligations had been treated as inconveniences to be worked around or ignored. Now they were factored into scheduling decisions with empathy and flexibility. CEO Michael Davis arrived for his weekly check-in, but instead of the formal meetings common in corporate visits, he joined the break room conversation. Employees had grown comfortable with his presence, seeing him as the leader who'd dismantled injustice rather than a distant executive to fear. "How's everyone settling into the changes?" he asked, accepting a sandwich from Dorothy's tray. "It's like working at a completely different store," Damon replied. "People actually want to come to work now." "The best part is feeling valued," Keisha added. "Not just as a number on a productivity chart, but as a person with ideas and potential." Davis nodded, remembering his own retail experience decades earlier. "That's how every workplace should function." "I'm sorry it took so long to get here." "You got here when it mattered most," Sarah said. "That's what counts." The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from new employee orientation programs to community outreach initiatives. The store was becoming more than just a workplace. It was developing into a supportive community that extended beyond business hours. As Davis prepared to leave, he noticed the wall where the color-coded scheduling board had once hung. In its place was a photo collage of employee achievements: Keisha's management promotion, Damon's successful inventory reduction program, Sarah's customer service recognition, Dorothy's 20-year service award from the previous month. The display represented hope, dignity, and the simple truth that every person deserved respect and opportunity regardless of their background. The colored dots had been replaced by something immeasurably more valuable: a workplace culture built on fairness, transparency, and human decency. Walking to his car, Davis reflected on the transformation he'd witnessed. Dismantling discrimination had been the easy part. It required only determination and authority. Building a better culture required ongoing commitment from everyone involved, and he was proud of how his employees had embraced that challenge. The real victory wasn't in the policies they'd changed or the managers they'd fired. It was in the laughter he heard from the break room, the confidence in Keisha's voice, and the genuine teamwork that had replaced fear and division. This was what justice looked like in practice. Not perfect, but constantly improving, with every person's dignity intact and their potential unleashed. 6 months later, Riverside Grocery had become a model for the entire company. Corporate executives from other districts visited regularly to study the transformation and implement similar reforms in their own stores. Keisha Williams stood before a packed conference room at corporate headquarters, presenting the store's success metrics to the board of directors. Customer satisfaction had reached 94%. Employee turnover had dropped to industry-leading levels, and productivity had increased 15%, proving definitively that fairness and profitability weren't opposing forces. "The key insight," she explained, clicking to her final slide, "is that people perform better when they're treated with dignity and given genuine opportunities to grow. The old system wasted human potential on an industrial scale. Board members asked thoughtful questions about scaling the reforms company-wide. The Riverside model was being implemented across all locations, with independent oversight committees monitoring compliance and investigating complaints. Damon Thompson had been promoted again, now overseeing inventory management for the entire district. Dorothy Miller was training new deli managers across 3 states. Sarah Johnson was completing her business degree with company-sponsored tuition assistance, preparing for management roles. The legal settlement with affected employees had totaled $2.3 million, but the real compensation came through restored dignity and career opportunities that had been systematically denied. 7 former Riverside employees were now in management positions at other stores. Patricia Stevens faced federal discrimination charges and was banned from management roles in retail. Her efficiency optimization system had been exposed as a textbook case of disparate impact discrimination, studied now in business schools and civil rights law courses. CEO Michael Davis reflected on the journey during his final visit to the store. The scheduling board displayed a rainbow of shifts distributed fairly among employees of all backgrounds. The break room buzzed with conversations about career goals, training opportunities, and genuine workplace challenges, not survival strategies for navigating discrimination. The hardest part, he told reporters who'd gathered to cover the anniversary of the confrontation, was admitting that sophisticated systems can perpetuate ancient prejudices. We convinced ourselves that data-driven decisions were automatically fair, but data without conscience is just mathematical bigotry. The store had become a symbol of corporate accountability and systematic reform. But Davis knew the real victory belonged to employees like Keisha, who'd maintained their dignity and professionalism despite facing institutional discrimination designed to break their spirits. As he prepared to leave, Davis noticed a new addition to the employee achievement wall. A framed photo of that infamous scheduling board with its colored dots, accompanied by a plaque reading, "Never Again," a reminder of what we overcame together. The image served as both warning and inspiration, proof that ordinary people could dismantle systems of oppression when leaders chose courage over convenience and justice over profit margins. If you've witnessed discrimination in your workplace, document everything. Screenshot unfair policies, record conversations when legal, save emails that reveal bias. Your evidence could save hundreds of careers and transform an entire organization. Don't wait for someone else to speak up. The colored dots in your workplace might be invisible, but their impact on real people's lives is devastating. Be the person who refuses to stay silent when systems of injustice hide behind corporate efficiency. Change happens when ordinary employees and principled leaders work together to demand better. The scheduling board at Riverside Grocery is gone forever. Help ensure that similar systems of discrimination disappear from workplaces everywhere. Document, report, demand accountability. Your voice matters more than you know.
One story can wake up a crowd. One moment of clarity can crack years of silence. At Beat Stories, we find those moments, and we share them loud and clear. If this made you think, hit subscribe. This is just the beginning.